All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to talk about suffering today, but probably not in the way you're used to thinking about it. This isn't some heavy philosophical lecture. Think of it more like a user's guide to your own mind, a really practical, problem solving way to look at life's biggest challenges. So let me just start by asking you a pretty wild question. What if pain wasn't your enemy? I mean, think about it. We spend so much of our lives trying to run from it, right? To avoid it, numb it out, pretend it's not there. But what if it isn't something to escape? What if it's actually an opportunity? Yeah, and there's this incredible analogy for this idea. Pain is like a watering hole. In a forest, all the animals, the shy ones, the predators, all of them, eventually have to come out into the open to get a drink. Well, our pain is kind of like that. It forces all of our hidden habits, our fears, our weird little patterns, all of it comes right to the surface. And this gives us this amazing, rare chance to actually see what's really going on inside our heads. Okay, so if we're going to observe our own minds, we kind of need to know what we're looking at, right? What is this me that's even doing all the suffering? Well, this approach breaks down our entire experience of reality into 5 core building blocks. They're called the 5 aggregates, which is just a fancy way of saying the 5 piles or components of any given moment. And they usually happen in a kind of chain reaction. It starts with a physical thing, which causes a feeling. We then slap a label on that feeling, which triggers a bunch of thoughts, all while we're aware of the whole process. But the really important word here is clinging, because the suffering isn't in the parts themselves, it's in how we grab onto them. Let's break them down one by one. First up is form, and this one's pretty simple. It's just stuff, the physical world, your body, the room you're in, the phone in your hand, everything you can touch. So where does the suffering come in? It happens when we cling to it, like when we get obsessed with how our body is supposed to look. That attachment, that's what creates all the anxiety. Okay, next up, feeling. And this isn't just about being happy or sad. It's any raw sensation that's pleasant, unpleasant, or even just neutral. You know that amazing feeling of the first sip of coffee in the morning? Yep, that's a pleasant feeling. The problem is, it's gone in a second. And our whole lives can become this game of chasing the good feelings and running from the bad ones, which, is a perfect recipe for feeling dissatisfied all the time. Number 3 is perception. I like to think of this as the brain's automatic label maker. It takes a raw feeling and, bam, it slaps a label on it. Good, bad, friend, threat. So that ache in your back, it's not just a neutral sensation anymore. Your perception has already labeled it as bad. This is so important. We're not experiencing reality directly. We're experiencing it through the filter of these labels we ourselves create. All right, number 4, fabrications. This is basically all the stuff our mind makes up. It's the constant chatter, your plans, your daydreams, your worries about tomorrow, that mental to-do list that never seems to end. I mean, just think about how much of our stress comes from clinging to a plan that's falling apart, or just hitting replay on some worry over and over again. That's us getting tangled up in our own mental fabrications. And last but not least, number 5 is consciousness. This is just basic awareness, the light being on. It's what comes through our senses, sight, sound, touch. And yeah, even the mind itself is considered a sense here. But here's the really cool part. Consciousness isn't some solid, permanent thing. It's much more like a fire. You know how a fire needs fuel to burn? Well, consciousness needs input from the senses to even exist. It's not some unchanging soul. It's an active, flickering process. So, there you have it. Form, feeling, perception, fabrications, consciousness. Those are the 5 building blocks of our experience. But here's the kicker. None of them are actually bad on their own. They're just what's happening. So what's the secret ingredient that turns this neutral experience into actual suffering? What are we doing to make it happen? The culprit has a name. It's clinging. It's that grasping, that white-knuckled holding on. The ancient word for this is upadana, and it has this brilliant double meaning. It means both the act of grabbing on and the fuel that you're grabbing, the very thing that keeps the fire of suffering burning. Action and fuel all in one. Let's stick with that fire analogy, because it's perfect for this. Think of pain and stress as the fire. It's hot, it's uncomfortable, and our first reaction is to just make it stop. But what do we do instead? We keep throwing fuel on it. And that fuel is our clinging. It's our demanding that things be different than they are. The more we cling, the more fuel we add, and the bigger that fire rages. Okay, so if clinging is the fuel, the obvious question is,
how do we stop feeding the fire? Well, the first step is to see exactly how we're doing it. We have to catch ourselves in the act. And this is often broken down into four main habits of clinging.
And here they are. First, we cling to sensuality. Just think about mindlessly scrolling your phone, looking for that next little dopamine hit. That's it. Second, we cling to our views. You know, those heated political arguments where it feels like you're defending your very soul? That's clinging to views. Third, we cling to habits and routines, even when they don't really work for us anymore. And finally, the big one. We cling to this idea of a fixed self, this solid, unchanging me at the center of everything. Now, that last one is super subtle, so let's be really clear. The point is not to say, oh, well, I don't exist, so nothing matters. That's one extreme. And it's also not to say we have this permanent, immortal soul. That's the other extreme. The path is in the middle, seeing yourself less like a solid thing, a noun, and more like a flowing process, a verb. It's always changing, always in motion. So I get it. After breaking yourself down into all these little parts and pointing out all the ways we cling, this all might start to feel a little bit bleak. But here's the twist, and it's a huge one. This isn't a diagnosis of a terminal illness. This is actually a roadmap.
And this metaphor just hits the nail on the head. We spend our lives trying to find permanent security and happiness in things that are, by their very nature, always changing. Our feelings, our bodies, our jobs. It's like trying to get comfortable on a really wobbly chair. You're just going to keep struggling and feel off balance. The problem isn't the wobbly chair. The problem is our expectation that it should be a solid rock in the first place.
So please, don't walk away from this thinking it's all doom and gloom. It's the absolute opposite of that. This knowledge isn't a diagnosis. It's a blueprint. It's a map that shows you how to get from being tossed around by your reactions to finding real, genuine freedom. Because here's the most powerful takeaway of all. Suffering isn't a life sentence. It's a system. A predictable one. And like any system, once you see the rules, once you see how it works, you can learn how to work with it. You can learn to navigate it with more skill and a lot more peace. And that really brings us to the final question, one for you to take with you. If our pain really is that watering hole, that chance to see ourselves clearly, then how could you change your relationship with it? What if, instead of trying to destroy your pain, you met it with curiosity, with a little compassion? What would it look like to turn your own suffering into a love letter to yourself?